without further ado, I introduce Paul Ekins. Paul, what are your priorities for Glasgow this year?
Right, well, thank you very much, Ella, and thanks for asking me to share these thoughts with you. And I've got 4 priorities, but I've got 2 initial points. So the first initial point is that while we've seen a welcome increase in the political rhetoric dedicated to addressing the climate crisis, the action is still nowhere near adequate to hit the Paris Agreement targets, and I'm sure everybody knows that. So there's this gap between rhetoric and action everywhere in the world that I've looked at. And that given the continued opposition from vested interests, and I mean particularly the fossil fuel industry, and the lock-in to high carbon technologies like coal-based power generation, only civil society mobilization on an unprecedented scale will generate the necessary political will. So the politicians aren't going to do anything unless they are pushed to such an extent that they can't not do what is required. So the International Citizens Assembly and other initiatives like it, and I'm a supporter of 350.org, which is another global campaign to mobilize civil society, are crucial in generating this mobilization. So that's the importance of the task. Then the demands. Number 1, no more new coal-fired power stations. This is especially relevant to those countries that are planning to build a lot of new coal-fired power stations, including China, India, Indonesia, and some other Asian countries. There is the Powering Past Coal Alliance, and that needs to become much stronger after the Glasgow conference, and it needs to include some of those countries. Together with that, we will need enormous financial mobilization in favor of renewables, because it's not an answer simply to say no coal. If no coal, then what? And the answer is renewables. And developed countries need to reduce the risks globally of installing unprecedented quantities of renewables. And I mean, this could be led by the World Bank, it could be led by the IMF, but it's got to have developed country backing and developed country money behind it. Number 3, a global carbon pricing alliance with a target of by 2025 to have $50 per ton CO2, by 2030, $100 per ton CO2. And those are countries that commit to introducing those carbon prices economy-wide. And in order to achieve that, there will have to be border carbon adjustments, because no country is going to put its own energy-intensive industries at a competitive disadvantage without having border carbon adjustments. And that goes along with, obviously, or it should be obvious, the removal of fossil fuel subsidies, because it doesn't make any sense at all to start pricing carbon when you're already giving negative carbon prices through fossil fuel subsidies. And my last point is forest protection and regeneration programs. So we need a global pro-forest alliance with the targets to return either to 1990 forest baselines, and that would be particularly relevant to tropical forest countries that have lost yet a long time before 1990. We've got to have a distinction between primary forests and plantations, and we have to integrate into that biodiversity